So on this, the first anniversary of October the 7th, which was the biggest massacre, rape, burning, beheading, and kidnapping of Jews since the Nazi Holocaust, this is actually a thank you message to many ordinary Iranians. I know many Israelis and Jews I know who are very appreciative that one of the very few positive results of the last year has been that it has brought, in a way, many Iranians and Israelis and Jews closer together. You know, what we've seen is so many people protesting against Israel across the world, including lots of anti-Semites. Millions and millions of people have protested almost every week in Europe, in America, in Canada, and Australia. Even right now, today, there are protests in Dublin and Madrid, all over the place. I would call them the useful idiots of the Iranian regime and its terror proxies, Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and other militia in Iraq and Syria. But one group has stood alongside Jews and the victims of October 7th and called for the release of the hostages, and that is many Iranians. Both in the diaspora, we've seen Iranians demonstrate alongside Jews in London and Paris and Germany and elsewhere, and even more bravely, we've seen inside Iran itself people protesting on behalf of Israeli hostages and Israeli victims, whereas others in London have demonstrated unbelievably in support of the murderers and rapists and kidnappers of Hamas, even though among the hostages that are still there are a 1-year-old baby and his 4-year-old brother. And we've seen that even supposedly distinguished people, the heads of Harvard and other top universities in America and in other places, they've allowed calls for genocide of Jews to be expressed on campus, and then they haven't properly denounced those calls. And we've seen almost silence on behalf of the victims of October 7th from the United Nations, from the Red Cross, from human rights groups. But Iranians have stood in solidarity. And why, I asked my Iranian friends, and I've been told this war is our war. Iranians and Israelis are the victims of the same regime. And we Iranians, I'm told, can see through the propaganda and lies that the Iranian regime has helped to plant in many gullible Western media and universities. And I have one final thought. Only a few years ago, the president of the regime, Ahmadinejad, he turned Holocaust denial into a kind of state policy. And he became a hero for his Holocaust distortion and denial. He became a hero to neo-Nazi racists across the world and to extreme left-wing fascistic anti-Semites too. And then you have the regime paying government employees, threatening students with punishment to go out and chant death to Israel, death to America, death to Britain. So many people in the West, Jews and also others, were left with the idea that the majority of Iranians are somehow anti-Semites. But we've seen in the last year with all these protests that this is clearly not the case. Whereas on the other hand, in Europe and in America, unfortunately, we can see more than ever that anti-Semitism runs deep. It did not just disappear after the Holocaust, it's only been buried. And, you know, anti-Semitism, if you examine it historically, it's always been a sign of the health of a society. So societies that were very anti-Semitic, like the Soviet Union, or indeed some of the Palestinian societies or fascist societies like Germany and Italy, they were kind of sick societies in general, where societies which were not anti-Semitic, like, for example, America in many times until recently, have been healthy societies. And that makes me actually optimistic for Iran once the regime has been kicked out of power. The lack of anti-Semitism shows that the Iranians are, it's kind of litmus test. It shows the Iranians are ready for a democratic and a better society once this regime has gone.